Ladies and gentlemen, how this is going to work today, we've got 3 different sections to go through. In the first instance, it's going to be me, and I'm going to tell you some stuff about what happened in Glasgow and some things that didn't happen in Glasgow, which perhaps should have happened in Glasgow. That'll be one element. But then we've got Kim and Grant, who are going to sit out the front, and we're going to do some Q&A. Grant Ward is a very experienced athletics coach, and amongst the many athletes he coached in Glasgow, he coached Kim Mickle. Kim Mickle, as you perhaps know, is a javelin thrower. She's the Australian record holder, the Commonwealth Games record holder, and most importantly, recently in Glasgow, managed to get a gold medal. More of that later on from that group. I'm very well aware that some of the sports here aren't involved in Commonwealth Games sports, and indeed even Olympic sports, but I'm hoping there'll be enough bits and pieces which will come out of this, enough little golden nuggets that you would be able to go off and apply them in different sports in the WA community. I hope that's the plan. Anyway, we'll see how we go, and you can let me know as we progress. So, the Commonwealth Games, I'm just going to move this down slightly. The Commonwealth Games, people have different views of them. Are they just a mini Olympics? Are they still relevant? And so on and so forth. It doesn't matter how you choose to look at them. There's no doubt, as you can see from these pictures and the emotionality associated with the athletes, for the athletes who go to the Commonwealth Games, it is still a big deal. It is still important. And we'll talk more about what the Australian Commonwealth Games Association think about in relation to that. Again, no doubt, no question that as far as the people in this room, Grant Ward and Kim Mickle, and getting the gold medal, that is still a significant thing. It matters at all sorts of levels, not least of which, of course, the personal achievement of getting the medal that you go for. It also impacts on funding. I'll talk about that later on. Athletics Australia are under the pump. You probably noticed that during the Commonwealth Games there were some challenges associated with what happened in the management team there, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But it is always going to be, as far as the Australian Sports Commission and the Australian Institute of Sport are concerned, it's going to be about delivering performances. So that's also Kim and Kelsey, who got a bronze medal in Glasgow, enjoying all that, and so on and so forth. But a few statistics about the Commonwealth Games. Prior to the Commonwealth Games, England had a goal for Glasgow, which was to win the Commonwealth Games. Australia had a goal, which was to win the Commonwealth Games. Australia had won the Commonwealth Games every year since Edinburgh in 1986, so that wasn't an unreasonable goal, you'd think. It's part of Australia's winning edge. That was one of the targets which the AIS, on behalf of Australian sport, had promoted to do 2 different ministers of sport from 2 different sort of political parties. So the idea was to win the Commonwealth Games. The unofficial goals from the English team was to get 60 medals, 60 gold, 60 silver and 60 bronze. The unofficial goal was to beat Australia by more than 15 gold medals, and the unofficial goal was to double the Canadian gold medal tally. So they came in with some pretty aggressive totals, and bear that in mind, obviously when they compete as an Olympic team in 2012 they also have the Scots and the Northern Irish and the Welsh, but this is England, which is separate obviously. England failed in all of those goals other than winning the Commonwealth Games because it didn't quite make its numbers. But my point from that is they're pretty scary, ballsy numbers that they actually thought they were going to go for those goals. So we had this idea we were going to try and win the Commonwealth Games, it's Australia, and basically there was another mob out there who was still relishing in the joys, the dividend associated with London 2012 funding, and their funding has been kept exactly the same for Rio 2016. They are still benefiting from that dividend, from that benefit, and they're now, you know, a real pain, a real threat to us in all sorts of sports. Okay, just something in the context of the idea of a village. I won't read all this out, you can read it as quickly as I can. There's a guy called Colm O'Connell. He's an Irish priest. He's not even a proper coach as such. He was a phys ed teacher as a younger man. He became a priest. He's been in Kenya for 20, 30 years or something. I've known him for a long time. Good guy, very laid back, very unassuming. But in his career, he has coached lots of world record holders, lots of Olympic champions, world champions. He's a legend. He is working with a group of Kenyans who obviously have some inbuilt advantages, it would appear, and are really pretty fantastic at middle distance events. But he's a terrific guy. Very laid back, very unassuming. But he has a saying where he talks about this idea that it takes a village to to raise a child. I don't think that's a unique saying. I've heard native Indians in America talk about something similar, so I don't think that's fantastically unique. But he talks about the idea of if you don't integrate all of the things that help to produce the child, or in our case here, the athlete, you pretty much are leaving it to chance. So my question would be, okay, well, if we're talking about the village, and we use WA in the example here, probably even as narrow as Perth, what sort of village is Western Australia in terms of preparing this sort of elite athletes? Well, here's a few statistics which, to my mind, worry me. They may not worry you, and that's fine, I'm relaxed about it, and they may just be an aberration from this particular Commonwealth Games, but to my mind, this is a bit of a worry. So there's a database from the Australian Commonwealth Games Association of all the people who went on the team to Glasgow, and it tells you where everybody was born. So there are 33 headquarters staff. They're people in the Games village who aren't working with any specific sport. They're people like Steve Monaghetti, the chef de mission, and other people working for him. None of those are born in WA. Of the 27 athletic staff, and that includes Grant and I, neither of us were born in WA either. There was one who was born in WA, Louise Sauvage, who's a coach in the para space. She doesn't live there anymore, but she was at least born here. And amongst the athletes, there are 99 athletes, and Kim is but an example. She's one of the 3 who were born in WA. So I wouldn't say they're fantastic stats, but then to my mind it gets worse when you look at the other sports as well. There are other 118 staff associated with the other sports, and of that, 3 of those were born in WA. There were 27 staff in swimming on the Commonwealth Games team, and none of them came from WA. So I'm looking at that and saying, it's for other people to discuss, we might get into it a little bit later on today, but I'm looking at that and saying, well, is this village perhaps doing enough, contributing enough in terms of getting people into this situation? Now, it could be that if we went back to Delhi and before that Melbourne and Manchester, maybe those statistics would be very different, which would be fine. Maybe Glasgow was a one-off, but I've got a bad feeling about that. Okay, are the Commonwealth Games important to us? Well, they're certainly critical to such sports as squash, lawn bowls and netball. They get a lot of coverage, they get a lot of sort of oxygen from that situation. A lot of the Olympic sports see the Commonwealth Games as a bit of a testing ground. Depends which sport you're in, which event you're in. If you're a steeplechaser in athletics, frankly, that's as tough a competition as being at the World Championships or the Olympic Games. If you're in the 100-metre sprints against Jamaicans and Trinidadians and Brits and Canadians who come from an Afro-Caribbean background, that's as tough as being at the Olympic Games. But there are other sports where it can perhaps be seen as a slightly easier run. The netball program is virtually the World Championships. The hockey probably isn't. There's a few examples like that. Weightlifting is relatively soft by comparison to Olympic lifting and so on and so forth. So some sports use it as a bit of a testing ground. They're a great opportunity to prepare for the multi-sport environment and all the unique challenges associated with that. For some athletes, they will be seen as the pinnacle of their career. So I worked a long time ago with Jane Fleming, who's a quite high-profile track and field athlete from Australia, quite famous. Is still living off her name in Sydney. The only medals she ever won were at Commonwealth Games. She never won any medals at World Championships. She never won any medals at Olympic Games. She wasn't really that fancy at that global level, but at Commonwealth Games, she got 2 golds and a couple of silvers, I think, maybe 3 silvers. So that, for some athletes, that is the pinnacle. The Australian public still love the Commonwealth Games. The Australian Commonwealth Games Association do a lot of polling and checking and finding out, and the interest in Joe and Josephine public is still very high, so that's good. The politicians love them. In Glasgow, a whole heap of politicians came through. They were up front and getting all the photo opportunities and so on and so forth, very big. And it is important to the sports because at the NSO level, the National Sporting Organisation level, they get a lot of funding to do the Commonwealth Games preparation. And obviously the Gold Coast Com Games in 2018 are going to be huge. And the fact that Canada and South Africa are bidding for the next ones after that means that the Commonwealth Games is still going to be viable. I didn't actually go to Delhi. I prepared athletes to go to Delhi, the previous one before Glasgow, and I thought Delhi was not very good, and it was a bit of a non-event, and it didn't get the coverage it should have done, and so on and so forth. So I was worried as to whether the Commonwealth Games was kind of on its last legs, but after Glasgow I would suspect it isn't. Okay, the Commonwealth Games as a mini Olympics. Many of the trappings, traditions, and sadly the pressures associated with the Olympic Games are all part of the Commonwealth Games. That doesn't come out very well on that picture, but that's like a reception thing you had the night before the opening ceremony. The Australian Olympic Committee have had a poor record in the past of hosting quite big events where they spend a lot of sponsored dollars at their receptions and things they do just prior to the competition starting. They're huge things, hundreds of people there, it's for the sponsors, but typically there's alcohol available, there are children in the room, there are minors in the room, and it's just a bad scene all round. Thankfully, post-London, the Australian Olympic Committee have decided not to do those anymore, but the Australian Commonwealth Games Association, if you said, hey, the AOC are doing something, guarantee the Commonwealth Games will do the opposite. So they still have those receptions. So me and Grant are definitely there, and Kim, I don't know if you were there, Kim, we're there, and there was alcohol freely available, and there were children in the room or whatever, and politicians stood up on the stage and talked for a long time, and maybe that's okay, I don't know. You guess, I'm thinking not. Okay, a few quotes, some of you have seen these before, very quickly. This is about using Olympic context. I'm saying the Commonwealth Games are like a mini Olympic Games. So this is a very experienced operator, Dick Palmer from the British Olympic Association. He used to say every 4 years he'd get on a plane with 300 normal people, and by the time he landed in the Olympic city, he had a whole load of nutcases with him. They all went crazy. That's called Olympic fever. Kevin Hickey, similar sort of era, saying about the emotionality associated with the multi-sport games and how it's different from just going to World Championships. He said the village is like Disneyland, a zoo, a circus, a noisy hotel, a shopping centre, non-stop party. You try to tell people about that. You tell young people, hey, the village is going to be great and rubbish on the same day, but I'm not sure they necessarily believe you. A Bulgarian hurdler from the old days, it's an emotional roller coaster. Some people very happy, some sad, many arguments. This guy saying he saw a fist fight in the dining hall. It was all about highs and lows. Nobody seemed to be normal or average. People are in ecstasy or they're really down in the dumps. A Cuban triple jumper. I was scared to leave my room. There were people everywhere. Everything was a queue. Queue, 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 queue. It was noisy all the time, 24 hours a day. I was trying to get ready and nobody seemed to care about me. A guy called the Secret Olympian. He is the Secret Olympian. He wrote a book. We don't exactly know who he is, but he's a British rower of some description. He talked about the village gradually changes from going from a monastery to like a holiday camp. The village gets noisier and noisier with more athletes having bugger all to do. They don't want to leave the village. It's like a free holiday for 2 weeks. I felt so sorry for the sports who are on in week 2 or who have to keep going for the entire 20 days. If you're in a team sport, hockey, netball, that type of thing, in theory, you're all the way through. You're playing on the last day. Your gold medal match, the match that matters more than anything else, is on the last day, while all around you is becoming a bit like anarchy. Bob Nidever is a famous American sports psychologist. He says he's seen things intensify with every game. It's been getting worse and worse. There have been homicide threats, suicide threats. Certainly in London 2012, an American track and field agent threatened the American relay coach with a gun, saying, not in the village obviously, it was outside of it, saying if my boy isn't on that relay lineup, you're dead meat, you're absolutely dead. And he meant it in that moment. I'm sure he didn't totally mean it, but he was furious, he was agitated, there was real money at stake. To be a gold medalist in the US track and field team is significant, and his boy wasn't going to get a medal, or it looked like he wasn't going to get a medal. Suicide threats have increased. In Seoul in 1988, Leon was there with the hockey team on, I don't know, the middle Thursday. I was on top of our building, a 27-storey building in Seoul. There was a Canadian rower on top of our building threatening to jump off because he hadn't made the final. What he was doing on our building, Lord only knows, but I got sucked in to go and see him. And sadly, there have been suicide threats or attempted suicides in every games I've been to since LA in 1984. So it's not as ridiculous as it sounds. This is a bit of a boiling pressure cooker situation, and things are a bit tricky. Finally, my wife, who's a sports medicine doctor, she said something in a book a few years ago. The village is exciting prior to the opening ceremony, but you're nervous and worried if you've got everything right, talking from a staff point of view. The atmosphere is hopeful, but there's an anaesthetic to reality. The opening ceremony is a relief that it's all about to start, but then you wake up to hell. That's an interesting word. It's a veil of unrelenting stress, especially for staff, particularly for those sports who last the entire game. So the summary of that, of course, is we can sit here, we can look at Commonwealth Games, we can look at Olympic Games, even World Student Games, I guess, to some extent, and think, that's fantastic, that looks glamorous, that looks interesting, that's where we want to be, and indeed, you know, we've got two exponents of that here today. But the reality is a bit different. And my premise, I guess, is that we perhaps need to do more as a community, as a village, in this sense, of preparing people for that type of thing. What seems to work? We know a whole heap of stuff. I'll very quickly go through this because these will be in the slides which you can have afterwards. But we know that the superstar Olympians, the ones who really deliver, go through their life having process goals pretty much on a daily basis. They live better in the here and now. They live in the present tense in the village. They're not thinking about things that are coming up or thinking about things that have gone in the past. If they're going to breakfast, the only thing that matters at breakfast is doing their breakfast, eating the right things and so on and so forth. If after that they're having a massage, the only things that matter is that massage and so on and so forth. You get athletes to chunk up their time. They tend to have plans and strategies for when things go wrong, for dealing with distractions. They have plan Bs, Cs, Ds and whatever is needed. They kept a diary and took some responsibility for their own planning and training. I mean, that's ridiculous, but when you look at, there have been heaps and heaps of research interviewing thousands of successful Olympians, and the second biggest thing I think comes through is that those successful Olympians keep a diary every day. I mean, does keeping a diary every day make you a successful Olympian? Well, it doesn't make sense, does it? You can't say a cause and effect, but it's a bit of a marker out there that that's the type of person who is keeping track of where they're up to. They had coaches who empowered them, so they didn't have coaches who depowered them and did everything for the athletes and made the athletes dependent upon them all the time. And they knew about this idea of controlling all of the controllable factors, being super professional, and then not getting too upset by the uncontrollable factors, because by definition they're uncontrollable. Who can deal with them? So they're things we know from a whole heap of research. And similarly, the opposite of that, what we know about some stuff that doesn't work, those athletes who are obsessed with outcome goals rather than focusing on the doing part. So again, we'll use Kim in Q&A later on. Clearly, Kim went to the Commonwealth Games to win the gold medal. That's an outcome goal, no question about it. You clearly don't want to become in second if you go into an event that's the favourite. But the way in which you try to ensure you get your gold medal is to focus on the doing bits of the sport, how you prepare, how professional you are, which then allow you the opportunity to get the gold medal. But if you're going around basically saying gold, 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 so what, I would say. The athletes allow themselves to become distracted by the uniqueness of the multi-sport format. Some of those quotes before, lots of quotes, hundreds, thousands of quotes, athletes saying they just got blown away by the enormity of it, the distractions. Athletes tend to be used to going to a world championship or some major event in their sport, where it is their sport. They go and it is only that sport. Suddenly you go to an Olympic Games or a Commonwealth Games. In the Commonwealth Games there are then 18 other world championships happening in that same village. The other sports have all got their equivalent of world championships, and in the Olympic Games it's more than 30. Athletes who are over-reliant upon a coach or a significant other, typically that tends to be a partner, that doesn't seem to work very well. Athletes who are poorly prepared to deal with the what-ifs and the guess-whats, that doesn't work very well. Athletes who go to a transmit-only mode when the pressure comes on. And it happens to all athletes to some extent, they stop listening. Not necessarily black and white, 100% versus 0%, but there's a bit of a phase there, and you can ask him about it yourself, but there are moments when athletes kind of, you're saying really good stuff and it's just kind of not going in because they're now, it's showtime, it's ready, and so on and so forth. That's okay if you've done all the prep beforehand, but you wouldn't want to be giving the one unique little bit of the little golden nugget on the last day, because it probably ain't going to get through, with all due respect to athletes and former athletes in this room. And then athletes who are not good at accepting responsibility for their performance, the athletes who kind of look to blame others. So athletes, what I want, my perfect situation, is an athlete who, when they win the gold medal or do something really, really good, I want them to say, that happened because I'm great, because I trained hard, I made the sacrifice, I deserve that, I've earned that right, and so on and so forth. But what you don't want are athletes who say that when they win, and then when they lose, they'll blame the umpire, the coach, the sporting association, some other blooming thing or whatever. That really sucks. It's called attribution theory, and you want attribution people who take everything internally. Win, lose or draw, it's down to me, all right? And that's something we need to see happening more. Okay, so we're talking about concepts in terms of what, as a village, what can we do, how can we prepare things. Certainly one of the things that's become very fashionable again in the last 10 years is this idea of resilience. We want resilient athletes. We want athletes who can sort of take a bit of a hit, get up again and fight again, and so on and so forth. Whole heap of research. I won't go into all of it, but there's been, what is resilience? It's this idea of being able to recoil, spring back after you've been bent or stretched or compressed. That's like a law of physics. Different research has happened, but the best form, down the bottom, the best form of resilience is something called resilient reintegration. That's individuals who make it through some adversity, so they've got some scars on their back, it hasn't all been plain sailing, and then they acquire some additional protective factors because that's going to help them in the future. So I'll spare Kim's blushes, but Kim went to London 2012 and didn't have a great experience. It wasn't very pleasant for her or whatever. Got some scars on the back, but in a way, not that you ever wish this on an athlete, that was kind of the making of her, in a way, because after that we got more resilience, better stuff happened, and almost, as they don't want it to happen to athletes, but that was good for her in a perverse way. Two main components in resilience. One is belief and focus, and that's what you try and teach athletes. That's what you're trying to do with athletes, kind of give them that. So you've got to try and create challenges in training, and you've got to educate the athlete as to what works and what doesn't work when dealing with negative situations. So it's not about going into a blind panic. It's not about throwing the toys out the pram. Often you've got to be in a situation where, yeah, shit is going to happen at some stage, no question about it. And what do? Well, you go back to your process goals. You go back to the controllable things, and you do a good job with them. It's often going to be about setting up little challenges in the training environment. Grant can tell you more, I'm sure, later on. But so in field event in athletics, you typically, the day before a final, you have to go to a qualifying process where you've got to do a certain distance or a certain height, whatever it is. Typically not massively difficult, but you do have to sort of get rid of some of the other athletes out of the group, and therefore, say in javelin, it might be you've got to throw 60 metres in a qualifying day. Well, Grant will have sessions with Kim during the year where he will have sessions where, hey, you're only getting 3 throws and you've got to throw 60 metres, and if you don't throw 60 metres, we're all going home. That's the end of the session, because that's what it will be like on the day. They would be trivial examples. I'm sure different sports could do different things. It's also about involving the athlete in the preparation for those specific sessions. It's typically about honest communication. It's about frequently resetting goals in an annual plan, and then emphasising again and again this idea of process goals. That's what we're trying to do when we're trying to prepare athletes to deal with the multi-sport environment. Okay, so we'll talk very narrowly about Athletics Australia for a little while, and then some broader things. So Athletics Australia had a pre-departure idea. There was myself and another psychologist working with the team. At one point there were 103 athletes and 30 odd staff. It was completely unmanageable, really. It ended up being only 99 athletes, which was lucky, but it still was unmanageable. The team was far too big. But we had a plan prior to that, which was about having the best off-field team at the Games. So what that meant was we would be, the staff, as it were, would be better than the English, the Canadian, the Kiwis, or whoever, at being super professional, super helpful, and doing a really, really good job. And then the unofficial one, and there's not people in the room who take offence, I'm sure, but also the unofficial goal was also to be the best off-the-field team against the other Australian teams who were there from the different sports. So we were aiming to be the most professional, the most slick we could be in terms of our aspiration, should we say, prior to the Games. We held various sessions, Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, where the staff, the potential coaches who were going to be going to the Games would be there. They would be in a situation, and we would run sessions. We did role playing, we did Q&A, we did some what if stuff, and so on and so forth, and we were trying to improve the overall standard of the staff who would be with us. Unfortunately, what became apparent during those sessions was that there was quite a mixed ability amongst our staff. We had some 30 staff on the team, and there were possibly going to be as many as 20 personal coaches who were also going to be in Glasgow, who weren't on full accreditation, but who were in a situation whereby they would get access to their athletes at the training ground or something of that nature. And what became very apparent in those sessions in Perth, Sydney and Melbourne was that some of them, you wouldn't necessarily employ them to do the job they were going to be there for. Really weird, in some cases just underprepared, inappropriate people, different goals and different agendas, and we were meant to be trying to make that into a team, and it was pretty pathetic, to be honest. I mean, we had 3 sessions, and after each one, I was thinking to myself, bloody hell, this is going to be impossible, but we'll play on and do our best. Again, the idea, the overall theme of the AA plan was to have empowered and resilient athletes. we assumed stuff would happen, bad stuff would happen in Glasgow. I don't think we really knew how bad the stuff was going to be, but we thought bad stuff would happen. So we had to teach the athletes to be empowered and resilient. And there were monthly phone calls which went on between myself and the other psychologists and the senior leadership team within athletics, trying to plan for that. And and that happened across a 9-month period, preparing for Glasgow. And in the last one, the last phone call, they mentioned, I asked a question about how we were going to deal with the numbers and so on and so forth. And it became apparent only in that last ever phone call that they thought we were only meant to be working with the potential medalists, and me and Renee, this other lady, we had been working with all the potential finalists. So it was a bit of a cock-up. So they thought we were meant to be working with about 20 athletes, and we'd been working with 50. And they were disappointed that we hadn't quite had the impact. And this is very weird, and it only came out in the last telephone hookup what they actually wanted us to do. So that was a bit of a mistake, and I certainly accept responsibility for that. Then WACE had a thing. That was a thing sent out to all WA potential athletes and staff who would be going off to the Commonwealth Games. Myself and Matt Bergin ran some sessions. We got a couple of ex-athletes in to talk about their Commonwealth Games story, and we tried to prepare the athletes as best we could from the different sports to say, hey, this is what it's going to be like. And the whole premise was about, could you do your personal best in a multi-sport environment, which is really tricky, really tricky. Now, obviously in team sports it's a bit hard to measure what your personal best is, but you know what I mean, in terms of could you really, really do some good stuff in a multi-sport environment given all the distractions and the hassle and the aggravation associated with that. They worked in small groups to discuss and plan for different scenarios, and if difficulties were going to arise for everybody, if it was all rubbish in Glasgow, as with every major multi-sport I've been to, the volunteers, for them, most of them, that's the first time they're ever doing it, because their city or their country last had a go 30 years ago or 40 years ago. So the current volunteers who are doing things have typically never done it before. So that's fine. I mean, you just accept they have to get on with it. There are professionals there as well who really know their sports, but mainly you're relying upon 80% of the volunteers who have never done it before. So as an example, there was one big dining hall, and then there was a small dining hall off to the side. In the small dining hall off to the side, they had these sort of juicer machines. You've probably more familiar with them than what I am, but you pour lots of fruit in and then you grind them and some lovely fruit juice comes out the bottom. All good. Except one day, the Ugandan weightlifter, or one of the Ugandan weightlifters was in there, that's all good. He's put his apples and oranges, and he also put some extra stuff in, which was like protein or powder or something of that nature. Good, so he gets his drink, he's off and running, and then lots of other people were getting a similar drink or the same drink, and they were only washing them out every 2 hours or so. So potentially, in terms of a drug bust, that was going to be there were going to be hundreds of Commonwealth Games athletes if that Ugandan weightlifter was doing anything dodgy, and he obviously wasn't, which is good. But if it was, that was just horrendous. But when that was brought to the attention of the lovely Scottish lady behind the counter, she couldn't see why that was a problem at all, because she was a volunteer. She obviously had some other job in some other life, and she just thought, no, this is good. We should all be drinking fruit juice from the same machine. And we're looking at that and thinking, no, this is going to be horrible. Or it could be great, because if you were a drugs cheat, you could rush in there and say, I had some from that, and you maybe get away with it. But who knows? But that's an example. Yeah, you're relying upon well-meaning volunteers, and it is a bit of a challenge. And finally, we talked about, from the WA perspective, the best thing to do is, if all else around you is failing, we will be better. In fact, we would like the adversity, because we'll do better. And we use the COPE model, which some people have heard me say before. That's where you talk about controlling the input. So you hear something, you get the facts straight, which is important. You have to sort of cope with the emotionality. You organise the input that's coming in. Can you verify that story? You plan a response, and then you execute the response. So it doesn't matter what the set of circumstances are, whatever ridiculousness gets thrown at you, that's what you have to do. So again, in the throwing area, the first day in the throwing warm-up area, they have a discus circle and a hammer circle and a javelin run-up, all good, all throwing in the same basic area, obviously. But because there are different implements and things flying around, they said, okay, javelin, you're on from 10 till 12, discus, you're on from 12 to 2 or whatever. It's all very well advertised. All the athletics managers get that. And we turned up on the first day for that going on, and we had 2 or 3 of our javelin throwers there throwing javelins. And again, the well-meaning volunteers, trying to be helpful, allowed some discus throwers and hammer throwers also to be throwing. So for about a 20-minute period, until we got that sorted, it was like a war zone, because those, these things kill, obviously, they're big implements, they bash into each other, they destroy things. It was chaos momentarily, but that's okay. We coped with that, we went and sorted, we phoned, we got hold of somebody who actually knew about athletics, and then they got on the phone and tore strips off the woman who was running the thing and said, whatever, so, but you have to cope. All right, so what about the preparation for the Commonwealths? The big stuff, which if I reflect on some of the debriefs I did with Australian athletes prior to, post London 2012, relates to this whole idea of transitioning. And I know it's not relevant to all sports, so forgive me if it's boring for you. But basically, there is the daily training environment. Kim mainly trains at Wace and the athletics track there. That's something she's very familiar with, can do it with her eyes shut, she knows where everything is, very comfortable, and does a whole heap of work. There's a whole heap of volume gets done there and has been done for years. Okay, that's fine. That's the daily training environment. And WA, I would suggest, in a lot of sports, and there are sports in the room who are going to say I'm an idiot, but for a lot of the sports, we've got pretty good daily training environments. Certainly when I compare it to some of the other daily training environments that some other nations have to endure, we're pretty lucky, I think. We're pretty good. No problem at all. My premise is, though, that the daily training environment, other than getting the volume of work done and spending the hours there, is almost irrelevant when it comes to then gold medal winning performances. Because what comes next, at some point, in some sports, but not all, you then go off to a holding camp. So for Glasgow, our holding camp was in Gateshead. For Moscow last year, for athletics, it was in Kent. Next year, the World Championships in Beijing will be in Tokyo for the holding camp. There's different situations, different people. But that holding camp environment, to me, is where a lot of medals are won and lost. All right, because people don't know how to transition from the DTE to the HCE, a bit jargony here, but that is a skill, that is a tactic. You have to have strategies ready for that. And then finally, you come into the competition environment, typically a village, or if you're in a single World Championships, it's a hotel with your sport in. All right, so what do we need to do? We need to make the daily training environment more relevant. These pictures aren't coming up at all well. Would it help if we turn these lights off, do you think? I don't know. But, that is a very rainy Commonwealth Games village, and trying to say that the reality of where you end up is a bit different from the daily training environment. So to my mind, too many young Australians seem to think that training hard equals success, so therefore training harder equals more success, and I don't think that's true at all. I think that's a nonsense, but there are a lot of athletes and coaches out there who seem to think that's the truth. So you have to prepare for reality. So this is, again, you can't see it very clearly, but this was a period on the Saturday night in the athletics. That's pole vaulters who didn't have a great night walking out. The rain on that situation, it was bouncing up to your hip. I mean, there was a 60-minute period where the rain was hitting it and it was bouncing up here, and it was horrendous. So the reality of the situation is somewhat different from the normal DTE here in lovely Perth, I would suggest. Okay, the holding camp environment can often be unrealistic as well, because typically, certainly where we've been the last couple of years, you're in a good hotel, you've got sole use of the facilities available to you, transport is easy, and in this case, there's only athletics there. No distractions, no dilution, pretty unrealistic. The competition environment is different. It's hard to see. I mess up these speakers, but I'm going to admit, Kim, you can just about see her blue. There's a woman standing up there. The girl who got the bronze medal. Kim is just behind her in blue, standing up there. That's Grant Ward sitting at his laptop. So Grant, often, if you went to the DTE here in Perth, will be out at the throwing area, and he'll have Kim and two other throwers, maybe. Sometimes it's just Kim, doesn't matter. There, and correct me if I'm wrong, he's got 3 female javelin throwers, he's got 2 high jumpers, he's got a heptathlete, a decathlete, and a male javelin thrower, and there are some who are not actually even there. So suddenly, in the real competition environment, Grant, who is after all Kim's coach, he's employed by Wace to help deliver Wace objectives, whatever, is now at the major championship. Do you have 10 or something? 12. You had 12 athletes to look after across 4 disciplines. Now, thankfully, because Kim has been prepared in an empowered way, and she's a resilient athlete, she could cope with that. But I've known some other athletes who, if their coach suddenly went from giving a virtually 1-to-1 coaching, is now coaching 12 athletes. We're talking a meltdown. We really are. I mean, forget it. We'll tear up any, don't bother entering, go home almost. Thankfully, that's not the situation with Kim and Grant, which is good, but that is the real world of the competition environment. There's a certain rhythm to the games. That's a photo of the throwers in the Australian team, obviously having a nice time. What I mean by the rhythm of the games, if there are 3 weeks of a games, and I know it's not exactly that, the first week I think is absolutely brilliant. I'm a bit of a junkie for that. I love that week. Nobody's competed, nobody's failed, nobody's won. Everybody's generally happy. All right, if someone's really injured or really sick, maybe they're not, but 90% of the people in the village are happy. There's a sense of expectation. It's a very, very good feeling. Sadly, the day after the opening ceremony, there's a whole heap of people who have competed, not just from Australia, but other teams as well, obviously, and suddenly the mood changes. And by the second day, it goes down a bit worse. And by the next day, there are some people who are into that sort of suicide situation. People are grumpy, or they're elated, they're going out and they're not coming in until 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're screaming and shouting and they're drunk and so on and so forth. But the rhythm of the games is there's this first week, beautiful week, lovely week, we're almost inoculated against the real world. Fantastic, really, really good. But then we get to a situation whereby you have to be aware that in the village itself there are lots of issues associated with the multi-sport stuff. This is just queuing to get your accreditation. That's not a bad queue by comparison. We arrived a little bit late, so we snuck through there pretty easily. Some people took an hour and a half to get their accreditation. We were about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, couldn't fault that. The dining halls, won't go through all of it, but the dining hall is huge. Thousands of people eating it. It's noisy all the time. It's open 24/7. For some athletes, certainly those sports where you have to make weight, that's a real issue. And for other sports where you just do need to be a little bit lean and mean, that's still a big issue. I know some other sports have the luxury of getting away with it, but for a lot of athletes, that's an issue. I'm a big man, I like my food, I've got no problems with that. But there were some athletes on our team who had to do running races and things, and they liked their food as well. And they were eating too much and putting on a few kilos and whatever. So the dining hall becomes like a real social mecca in the event, because you go there, you're bored, you're not training as much, you've got lots of time on your hands, so you sit there and you eat your dinner, perfectly reasonable. I don't think there's much problem with that going on. But then you're about to go, but maybe some other people turn up, so you sit and have a chat to them, or some interested people. The classic thing is Usain Bolt came in, or the Queen came in, or whatever. So you do hang around and you have another cup of coffee, certainly in my case, but in other cases, people had another dessert, or another bread roll, or cheese and biscuits, whatever. It's a good place to be, certainly in Glasgow, because it was raining a lot, and walking out in the village was not a very nice experience particularly. So you stayed in the social club almost, of being in the dining hall. So there are challenges with that. Security is a big issue. These police officers up there, you really can't see that. They've got machine guns in their hands. I bribed them to do that photo with a kangaroo pin each, so they were quite laid back about it. They didn't mind that. But it is an issue. So everywhere you go, you're queuing, you're hassling, you're having sort of challenges associated with the security. You have to be aware of that. This is raising awareness. I don't know if any of those people from WA, but the AIS brought various coaching groups through at the Commonwealth Games to do work on development stuff. You get VIPs like Usain Bolt. The Governor General popped in to see us. Again, you can't really see, but outside that's pouring with rain. The area has become a quagmire in Glasgow. The Governor General comes in, nice, that's okay. Should we transition? You can't really see that very clearly, but on the left-hand side, that's a bus. When we first turned up, really easy, no problem at all, hardly anybody on it. And by the time you get later in the week, there's that photo, that's absolutely full up, and then as you move further on, it gets more and more crowded. We try and do a lot of awareness and teaching. Over on the right-hand side out of this picture is Eric Hollingsworth. Eric Hollingsworth is the chief coach who got sacked while we were at the Commonwealth Games. He's doing a talk to the troops there to motivate them and inspire them and so on and so forth. They don't look like a very inspired group of people at that particular moment. The opening ceremony, fantastic. I'm sure there are people in this room who've been to opening ceremonies before. It is brilliant, it is marvellous. It's also a heap of rubbish as well. A lot depends on when your event is on, obviously. If you're on the next day, you shouldn't go, but certainly players have gone the night before they've been playing. Pretty good, pretty exciting, but again, the members of the Australian team, not the athletics team, I'm glad to say, we get in there, you do your bit, you walk around the track, you then get held in the middle while other sports come through, and there are a whole heap of Australians standing on chairs, not as good as these chairs, really sort of like school chairs, as it were, jumping around, standing up and down, making a bit of a pyramid and a bit of a pillar, and as you can imagine, they fell off at one point. And I think generally the injuries were minor, cuts and abrasions, but you're looking at that and you're thinking, for some of these sports, that's a 4-year preparation, and because you're acting like a turkey, at the outset, or bouncing up and down on chairs and falling off and twisting your ankle. That doesn't seem a very appropriate way to go. The village life, this is Eamon Sullivan in London 2012. You can't really see it very clearly, but he's got a silly hat on. He's got a silly hat on because he lost a card game, and the rules in the Australian swimming team, which I think was genuinely accepted, was a disgrace in London 2012, was if you lost the card game, you had to wear a silly hat. That's fine, we've all played in that sort of thing. Unfortunately, the rules also meant you then had to wear that silly hat around the village for the rest of the day, possibly even 2 days. I can't remember now. So Eamon Sullivan, who's a good bloke, obviously, he goes and does all that. But his competitors are there. In terms of the image you want to be giving off, in terms of the presence you're doing as an Australian, a guy who went in as a medal favourite, by the way, and he looks like an idiot in that sort of situation. All right, just a few personal Glasgow reflections before we get our guests up to talk and take Q&A. From the Athletics Australia team point of view, the transition from the holding camp environment into the village wasn't slick enough. We had talked and talked and talked to the athletes and the coaches about, okay, it's going to be different. Suddenly we're going to go from having that all-exclusive use and everything being easy. It's going to be chaotic. When you go to the track in athletics, there were 60-odd nations suddenly using the track, which, by the way, on one side was only a 4-lane track, not a proper track, warm-up area. So that's going to be tricky. There's going to be hassles of the food, the 24/7. And bizarrely, and definitely I take responsibility for that, the first 48 hours, a lot of our non-elite athletes outside of that top 20, were behaving like they were on a school trip, which is definitely somewhat down to me. And you couldn't understand, you couldn't believe it, but obviously some athletes had realised they were just about getting the tracksuit, get into the Commonwealth Games, and that was it, job done. They were in that village. They had achieved their goal. And you can't knock that. If you're an athlete of only a certain amount of talent, to get to the Commonwealth Games is pretty bloody good. My argument would be, well, now bugger off and leave the rest of us to do the proper job, but it doesn't work like that in the Commonwealth Games. The Commonwealth Games and Olympic Games are a bit different. One of our relay runners, 2 days before we travelled from Gateshead to Glasgow, ran in a meet in Loughborough and he pulled his hamstring. Bad luck, he tears his hamstring, really, really bad luck. If that had been just the athletics team and we were going to World Championships, he probably still would have come with us, just for the experience and learning about that setup, whatever. But Australian Olympic Committee and Australian Commonwealth Games Association are very fascist about, no, we don't take injured people into the village, you're cut, as it were. So he then gets told by a not particularly caring, sharing manager, you're out, son, that's it. Oh, and by the way, we have to take all your kit off you, all your bags and everything, whatever. Which was, that's tough, but they are the rules. And then because we had a lot of issues with uniforms, I won't bore you with, but there were lots of problems with sizes, but he had some kit which one of the coaches thought it would fit him. So one of the coaches then went to his room. This kid, his leg is buggered and whatever. And the coach goes there and says, you won't need it. So he took his kit away to use for himself, sort of thing. And I mean, just really classy, as you can imagine. Very, very nice. Okay, we did have uniform problems. Again, not to be sexist, it is an issue more for the women than the men, but there were certainly issues with women. The running uniforms didn't fit properly, and they're worried then about body image and basically how they look and looking stupid or whatever. Real problems. The gear that you get when you go to any of these major is absolutely fantastic. Obviously, for those people who've been there, we're so lucky, we're privileged. But the actual competition uniform you typically don't get until you're in the village. And if it's wrong, and it's the wrong sizes and it doesn't work, there ain't a lot of options. You can't just go down to the sports shop and buy a repack. It's a real bugger. And we had various female athletes, and it doesn't even bear thinking about, who had to be swapping their running shorts between each other in between races because there weren't enough proper ones to go around. This is a multi-million-dollar industry, and we're at the sort of the pinnacle event for the year, faffing about doing stuff. And unfortunately, as a psychologist, some of that then landed on me because I'd be having a conversation with somebody who was genuinely distressed, really distressed. Anyway, UK athletes and coaches, I don't know why that's even on there, but a funny thing, I went and sat, the great big thing, I went and sat down, and some athletes who I used to work with, one of them is now the national coach for Jersey. Jersey's a little channel island off the south of England. There's nobody there, but he's the national coach of Jersey. He came and sat down with me, and a former athlete I used to work with came and sat down with me, which was fine. We just had a cup of coffee, hello, how you are, whatever. And the bad looks, the black looks I got from various Australian team colleagues or whatever was astonishing to me, but that was obviously considered as a betrayal, so that was something for me to remember in future. I won't talk to anybody from the opposition. Our chairman of the selectors, who's a really good, reasonable bloke, Australia had come second to India in the Delhi Games in athletics on the gold medal table, but the Jamaicans, Kenyans and English had not necessarily turned up very much in Delhi, but we'd come second then. The last time I think Australia had won the athletics event was Melbourne, and before that it was 20 years before. But suddenly, the night before we began this competition, the chairman of selectors did a press interview back in Australia saying that he expected Australia to win the athletics competition. No, we came third after Jamaica and Kenya. We beat the English, which was really, really good, but we came third, which was a credible effort. But he announced to everybody, very outcome focused, that we were going to win that, which was complete nonsense. I mean, it was so ridiculous. It was fact, we could laugh it off almost because it was so ridiculous. Okay, when Eric met Sally, we don't have to get into the details, but our head coach, as was, who isn't anymore, and Sally Pearson, there was not a meeting of minds. In the old days, as recently as 12 months before that, they were close, and Eric had certainly played a hand in helping her get her gold medals. He did her last minute coaching and so on and so forth. The details are so boring it's not worth getting into, but that all broke apart earlier in this year. So we had a situation whereby there was us lot in the trenches dealing with the normal day-to-day stuff, being distracted by stuff that had been put in the Sydney Morning Herald back in Australia on a Saturday, where basically a press campaign had been mounted and we were in trouble and the coach was in trouble and he wanted Athletics Australia to back him, and they were going to, and then the president got involved and then they weren't going to back him. It was horrible. It was a horrendous time, and I don't think anybody was in the right. What was interesting to me, though, was that while all this was going on, the athletes in the village, and athletes in our team, you can ask Kim about this later on, some of them were getting distracted by it. And what was very interesting was, if you follow Twitter in particular, it was extraordinary in terms of the traffic that was going on back in Australia, more so than the people who were actually in the trenches doing the stuff. And it was fascinating. And it was vitriolic. It was interesting. I was kind of reading it and thinking, wow, you wouldn't put that in writing, but somebody had, and whatever, and so on and so on. And it was very, very heavy. And there was a moment then, probably 3 days, once it became apparent that Eric was being sacked and sent home, there was a little campaign building on Twitter to get Steve Hooker, late of this parish, a fantastic pole vaulter, who was never coached in his life, by the way, but there was a little campaign being delivered by the Melbourne Mafia about saying, hey, Steve Hooker should be the next chief coach, which was curious, but it's a theory, and then a day later his wife got done for drug taking from Daegu or somewhere, 4 years, so then that all disappeared. That evaporated on Twitter. But it was interesting how there was like a trend going on, and we were in the village preparing athletes for medal winning situations, and people back in Australia who were on the board or on the committee wanted our time to argue and debate this sort of thing, and it was like they've really lost the plot as to where the priorities were. NAS funding stands for National Athletics Support Scheme or something like that. It's the money that people like Kim get for being good, for being podium finishers. They have different categories of funding, which is good, that's appropriate. If you're a winner, you're a grinner, etc. And while we were in the village, Simon Nathan, who's the guy I was rooming with, he's the chairman of he's the high performance director, he sent out an email to all of the athletes saying, good, you're doing what you're doing in the Commonwealth Games, but don't forget, when we get back, you'll have the next round of reviews for the NAS money. Now, for most athletes, Kim included as well, I'm sure, that money is really important. It's a major distraction. It's the way they manage to feed themselves. And so suddenly we went from being in the village and it's all about processes and being empowered, and suddenly the athletes have got this thing saying, you've got to jump 6 meters 50, or you've got to do this, or you've got to do that. And it was like, wow, we almost shot ourselves in the foot. There was a subsequent email which went out correcting any earlier mistakes which might have been in the first email, that it is about process. But it was like, wow, we are really dicing with death here in terms of getting confused about what's going on. Media preparation skills, we need to do more of that. Ignorance on my part, or just me making assumptions which are wrong. Some of our athletes did press stuff before, during and after, and some of it was appalling, and they said the wrong thing at the wrong time, and they dug holes for themselves, and we've got to get better at doing that. The opening ceremony I talked about. The business about tapering in athletics, swimming, cycling, things like that. There's a big emphasis on you taper, you take the weight off the athletes bounce up and they do their PBs and so on and so forth. All good, except that some of the less experienced athletes, there are issues with they are literally moving faster then. They are, they feel better, much better. And unfortunately for some of those younger athletes, which represented a whole heap of the Commonwealth Games athletes, their technique goes then, because they're more used to doing their running, jumping, throwing when they've done 3 sets of weights that week. Suddenly they're not doing weights anymore, they're bouncing around, which is absolutely fantastic, and their technique disappears. So we've got to have a little think about that, I would suggest. Personal matters, I was pretty much sleep deprived throughout the thing. We had rubbish coffee, which wasn't very good, but I was sleep deprived, mainly because I was dealing with the Eric Hollingsworth thing. I was like the mediator, bouncing backwards and forwards. And then I was sharing a room with Simon Nathan, who was also involved in it. Yeah, so we were typically conspiring, plotting, and getting it all wrong at 2 o'clock in the morning and that sort of stuff, so that wasn't very good. So I was a bit off my A game. And family matters, I got a new granddaughter while I was away, and you have that moment while you're there thinking, bugger, I need to be in Perth, not here. Now that happens. But I use that as an example because there were bereavements. Obviously, you have a big team. Sadly, some people are going to die while you're away, so that's not very good. And there was one athlete from one of the sports, her father committed suicide the week before we went. So yeah, there is some personal stuff that goes on. We're there trying to get the medals by focusing on the processes, but we're trying to get them, and then there's stuff happening, and that will be forever. Very quickly, medal-winning leadership. I'll sprint through this, so we've got to do the Q&A in a couple of minutes. So most of that stuff was looking at the team, looking at the athletes, and how we prepare them. Some really good stuff came out last week from Canada, so I just put it up here just as a thing, because it's very topical. This was interviewing 10 coaches and 12 Olympic medalists, talking about what made the difference and so on and so forth. So very current, very relevant, I'd say. And the question to all these people, interview technique, was how were the medals won and what qualities do the coaches have? 3 things come out loud and clear from these people. One is the idea about having demanding leadership. So that is the idea that there comes a point when the coach has to demand stuff and says, yeah, okay, well, this is what the standard is, and you either have to do it or bugger off, sort of thing. So there is a sense of a little bit of old school there. That research from Olympic medalists in 2010 saying that in fact they need that. The athletes, even in this new world with Twitter and everything, the athletes still do need some of that directive stuff, saying this is what you have to do. Relational leadership, this is the idea that there does have to be, a rapport has to be developed, different for different age groups, obviously you have to be wary of that, but at the Olympic level of medalists, they're typically going to be people in their 20s or 30s. And then finally, the interesting one, I think, which I would argue is where Grant sort of tops the poll, is the idea of solution-focused leadership. And that's the idea of saying, okay, we're going to learn, we're going to look at things along, we're going to go ahead, we're going to be prepared to experiment with things, and have what I think, which is something I think Grant has, this sort of analytical tenacity, almost, saying, okay, well, what needs to be done to get another half a metre or half a second or whatever it is in the different sports, and almost be relentless in terms of investigating that and trying to check out what can we do, what are they doing, what should we be doing, and so on and so forth. Kim is ranked number 2 in the world. There's only one lady ahead of her, and that's pretty blooming good, obviously, in the world standards. But clearly, the idea is not to be number 2. You don't do sport to be number 2. So Kim is about to go off to competition tomorrow, the Continental Cup, used to be called the World Cup. She'll come back from that, and then there'll be a big debrief process and trying to work out, okay, well, are we just going to be coming second, or would we rather come first? Lots of stuff. I can tell we're at the end of this now, which is good. We'll get a chance for questions on that later on. There's some work you need to do. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce Kim, Mickle and Grant Ward. They're going to come and stand out the front here. It's Q&A, and they've said, within reason, please just ask questions. If they want to answer them, they will, and if they don't, they won't bother, obviously. Kim has brought her gold medal with her, which she can hand around, pass around the room. And please, you go for your life trying to say, well, I would suggest, are there things that Kim and Grant have now learned? This is another good performance, did well the previous year. What are they doing? What are they looking at? And so on and so forth.
If you were kind of to reflect back, obviously things have changed and shifted a fair bit for you in the last couple of years. If you were to kind of look at what you did leading up to London to what you do now, what are the significant changes in the way you prepare?
Yeah, well, a lot. I went into London thinking I was going to win the thing, I threw a personal best like 3 weeks before the championships, and I was in amazing shape, but I was one of those athletes that thought the harder you work, the better you're going to get, and that's it. Like, it doesn't matter about anything else, it's just all about how hard you work. And I actually didn't really realise about the whole psych side of sport. I almost thought that was just a bit of a waste of time almost, because I literally just thought it was just a physical ability, not a mental ability. So when I went to London, I literally thought, like I said, I was going to win the thing or at least get a medal, and I failed to even make the final. So I didn't even put in my mind that I wasn't going to make the top 12, and when I threw my final throw, the third throw, and I missed the point again of the jab. So with javelin, it's just like you have to nail the point for it to go. And my first throw, I hit it too high, so I overcorrected, hit it too low. And then my third one, I freaked out because I thought, well, shit, like I thought I was going to like just throw my first throw and be qualified and pack my bags and off I go and like, here's my gold medal run. But yeah, my third throw, I freaked out and missed it again. And I actually met up with Brian for the very, very first time in our debrief after London. And he said, oh, so what do you do during a competition? Like, when you're out there, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, well, I literally watch all the other girls throw, and I'm thinking that's a good thing because I'm learning what they're doing. And I was one of those people that were clapping them in and all these sorts of things, and I was almost more focused on what they were doing than what I was doing. And like I said, I actually thought that was a good thing because we had the world record holder in our event, and I thought watching her is the best learning tool I can have. But what an idiot. Like, I was the one that they probably thought they should have been watching out for me, yet I'm watching out for them, and it was a big confusing, like, I just overcomplicated everything. And so now I honestly haven't watched anyone throw besides from myself since London in a competition. So I literally turn my back to everyone when they throw. They probably think I'm a real bitch for not watching them, but I don't watch anyone anymore. I focus literally on anything and everything that I'm doing, and I only ever bring 2 cues into a competition. We've realised that anything more than 2 and it becomes too complicated, and even if your first throw you nail those 2 points, you don't then think of another 2 points, you just still stick with your 2 points. And they're probably the main aspects that I've changed since London in terms of the sports psych sort of side of things. Also, yep, like I said before, I thought I was going to win the Olympics. I didn't think about the whole process of getting through qualifying. I just thought that was going to be easy and all these sorts of things. So I've now prepared a lot better for major championships. I now know what you should and shouldn't do. Obviously, Grant and I, we've worked together for 11 years now, and my physical ability is amazing and has always been. That's why London was so disappointing, because I could have medalled there quite easily. But Grant and I, it's with javelin, it's such a like sort of an older person's sport, because like every major event has been won by someone who's between the 28 and 32 sort of mark. So I'm now 29. So it's just that sort of developing a relationship with a coach, knowing what works for your body, knowing what technique works, and just moving through. And that's why it takes so long to finally realise what works and what doesn't. You have to go through those sort of bad things to then come out of the other side. And now that I've got, like, obviously Grant and I, we know each other stupidly well. Like, I can just look over him at a crowd and he'll just be doing this and I'll be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like, we almost don't need to communicate anymore. We just kind of know what we're both thinking at a championship, which is great. And now, obviously, having the sports psych side in my sport makes this work as well as this, which is kind of good. So, yeah, and I always say London was the best and worst thing that's ever happened. It's the moment I became an Olympian, but it's the moment I realised that things weren't as easy as I thought they were. Yes?
Carolyn from swimming. I'm interested to know, you talk about being coach and athlete relationship for 11 years. Obviously there would have been a lot of changes along the way between your relationship. Can you talk about that or describe what the changes have been?
Yeah, we've been together since 2003, and that was off the back of 2 elbow reconstructions. I snapped my elbow ligament in 2002, and I had to have an elbow recon, and the coach that I had during that literally said, "Oh, Kim, you're stuffed. When you're better, come back to me." And I just went, "Oh, so I have to do all this by myself." And then it was amazing because Grant then came down to the gym when I was trying to do my rehab all by myself, and like I was 17 when this happened, so I was still really young and not really knowing what the hell I was doing. And Grant came down and said, "Look, I know your coach is, his name was Steve Lemke at the time, look, I know he's going to be doing all your throwing, but look, I'm willing to be here to help you through your rehab, just to be sort of like someone to talk through and things like that." And that's when I just went, "No, I want him instead of this other guy." And Grant had a high jump and multis background, so in multis there is javelin, but from then on he then really focused in on javelin and really took me as a bit of a good project, and ever since then it's been great. Like obviously with 11 years there's going to be some ups and downs and things like that. We've definitely worked through a lot of indifferences that we've had, and that's just part and parcel of being an athlete. Like we travel together for 2 months of the year over in Europe, and like we're in Finland, and then we're in Switzerland, and then we're in London, and it's just me and him, and we're on a train or we're on a plane or we're in a hire car, and there's a lot of one-on-one time which is sometimes quite overwhelming, but then we both realise we're human as well. And we've got a really good way of sort of switching on to javelin and then switching off into normal life. And like, we'll go out and have some laughs and go out and play a game of golf and completely not think about javelin. And when it's time to think about javelin, that's when we sort of switch on. So I think it's really important to not just overwhelm someone 100% about what they're doing, or else I know I'd probably get over it. So once I'm at the track or at the gym or at a stadium, I'm flat out 100% an athlete, and when I'm out of there, I'm completely not. And I think that's a really good balance. You right?
I'm not sure. Coming out yet? Sorry about that. It's true. I mean, like I said, it's been a big process, and you learn as you go along. I mean, Kim talked about the fact that when you go away, you travel, and you spend a lot of time with each other, which is not normal. It's totally not normal. And so you get sick of each other, but you have to work out strategies to know when is enough. So we try to go about our normal daily interactions as if it were a weight training like back here. So it'll be like, I'll see you here, I'll see you there at the training session. I don't need to attend all the sessions because I don't always attend all the sessions back here. It depends what it is. So it certainly is you develop strategies that help you get through. We certainly do know each other pretty well in terms of what she likes to do, what she doesn't like to do. I suppose after 11 years, I mean, you're going to have a fair understanding of what your athlete's capable of, what they're not capable of. And even when you get to the point where, yeah, she used to train hard. It's like it's an education. You did work out, okay, well, you can do this, but you can't do that. An example, she went to Doha this year and she threw pretty well. She came back, and then she was a little bit tired. I was away. I had to go and do under 17 camps and a few things, and we use biomechanics quite a lot in our preparation. And some of the aspects of her throwing wasn't going particularly well, so she rang me. I was in Canberra, and she goes, "I'm just not getting it. I feel like I'm disconnected with the javelin." She said, "I think I need to throw more." And I went, ding, 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 no. I think you need to throw less, not more. So rather than try to do more to solve a problem, let's break it down and do less. Let's go back to feeling the connection with the javelin off a shorter run up, and then build it back up again. Because she'd already had my program, and my program said this, this, and this. So, I mean, while you write something down, it doesn't mean to say it's set in stone. You're going to have to always remodel it according to where the athlete sits. So we did that. She found the connection. She went into her own, and she finished on the podium again, and then we came back and put another block in. So there's lots of different things that can happen in terms of the way you develop your relationship with your athlete. I used to do all Kim's gym work and everything that we did, so I had a fair understanding of where she was. Now I liaise with our strength and conditioning coach at Wace and a lot of the other support staff as well. So it's far more multidisciplinary approach rather than just me. I used to be the sort of person that used to think I need to do it all, otherwise I'm not going to get things done the way I want. Now I'm happy to share to share some of the load and move things around, but ultimately I'm still involved in all aspects of her training, so strength and conditioning as well. And even with Brian, we'll sit and we'll discuss things after a session. So we'll throw, and we'll do our biomech, and we'll go and have a coffee. We'll debrief the session, and where we're going to from every session. So it's really an important factor in what we do.
Michael from sailing, do you feel that, you know, handing over the mental side, obviously someone is digging your brain a little bit, and you have a shrink involved. Was that challenging for you, or?
Not really, because first of all, Kim had some sports psychs with her working ways, but it really wasn't. I didn't really know what they were doing. I wasn't really. To me, they were just going off and having a chat, and I didn't know what they wanted. So, and I knew Brian. I'd known Brian for a long time when he was working with Jane Fleming. He even worked with my wife at one point too. So I knew the sort of work that was there, and I really wanted a performance-driven approach to sports psychology. Not some, sometimes you think sports psych is a bit fluffy, but I really wanted sort of an edge to that. And the other thing that was important is, Kim, she's a bit stubborn, and she's got her ideas, and so to have Brian come on board started to dispel some of those things that she was thinking, which is what I needed to get as well. So I think the balance of that was pretty good. So I was really, stoked.
Yeah. Chris from Yachting, use of video in your coaching of Kim.
Yeah, I do.
Share with us to what level you actually go as far as the use of video.
It depends on the phase I'm in. Generally, Monday morning is a biomechanical session. So I have my biomech out there with 2 cameras, and he'll do the video for me and send it back to me. And that gives me information on what her throws are. Then I started to introduce visual feedback. We'd do that on a Thursday. As we got closer, I said, Kim, do you think you need to see where you're at? Because we do a lot of stuff with feel. And then to be able to bring the video feedback in, which is she can throw and it's on a delay, she can come and have a look at herself in real time. I think that sort of information is critical for the athlete to be able to put the 2 and 2 together, because what she thinks she might be doing, she may not be actually doing. But I don't want to overuse it either, because then the athlete becomes reliant on, did I see it, where am I at, how does it, so she's got to understand more about how to perform the activity by feeling it, rather than just going back and relying on what she's seen. So you've got to link the 2 together. So there can be a time when you do that, and it needs to be managed. That's my thoughts on that.
And does Kim have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I'm very much like Grant says, I'm a bit stubborn. I'm very much, I need to believe in something for me to do it 100%. And so if Grant, I can, whatever Grant says, 100%, well, 90% of the time, I usually feel exactly what he says. But there's a few things where, one of my biggest problems is length in my arm. The longer your arm length, the better the pull for the jab, and constantly my elbow drops. And that's one thing that I really struggle to feel myself. I'd throw and I'd be like, oh, that was length, and he was like, you were so short then, Kim. I'm like, bullshit. No, it wasn't. That was length. And then it's like that other visual feedback that it's almost like to reassess, okay, Grant has the eyes and he can see it, and I thought I could feel it, but I can't. So the video then sort of proves another point. So it's really handy to use those things to actually sort of ingrain what's going on, because sometimes you just can't feel things. And I feel like I'm pretty coordinated. So when I am proven wrong a few times, it's quite embarrassing. But I love it. And with the biomech, he gives us all data back, and there's about a row of 20 different angles and all sorts of numbers that everyone would just look at and go, oh. But my angle of release prior to 2012 was 45, which is not great. Our world record holder throw was about 37. So my 45 is shocking, and now I'm averaging 39 to 40 just because now we can it's taking 2 years to get that, but it's slowly now we can actually judge what my angle of attack is, and that's 100% of how far your javelin goes. If it's going too high, it's not going to go the distance. So it's really cool to have that feedback and to know, like, even those days where your arm's dead, you've just done a massive gym session, your jab's going nowhere, so you feel like it's almost a pointless session, but then you see your data and your data's coming back that you're hitting 38 degrees and you're like, well, awesome, like obviously my work's working, I'm just stuffed, so it's not going to go very far, but that gives you almost the sort of steps to go, confidence and steps to go forward, because you know it's working. So it's pretty good for those winter moments where literally all that you're doing is training and training and training, and it's like my lifestyle in a winter is just so routine and so boring. Like Brian says, like, write a diary, and I'm like, well, I probably shouldn't when I'm home, because it's that boring and that repetitive that it'll literally be the same thing written on every day. But to know that you're actually ticking those boxes and getting those process goals done by some visual aid as well as coach feedback and all those sorts of things is really crucial, I think, to keep going.
Tony from Trampoline Gymnastics. Do you find yours is a very individual sport? So do you find it quite lonely? Do you train on your own, or do you train with other athletes, or do you train with another javelin thrower so you can compare?
Well, in the gym, I've got my gym instructor who's always there for all my gym sessions. And then at the track with my throw, we do have another couple of training partners, but because it is very technical, it's awesome just to have one-on-one time. But then also Grant has other responsibilities where I'll have to do it by myself, and sometimes that's good because then you can get in your own mind, and then some days Brian will come out and then we'll do distraction work and visualization work, and like he's gotten me to do throws blindfolded and singing Bar Bar Black Sheep, and I feel like a bit of an idiot, but it's great. Like it teaches me about anything can happen. If I can do my entire run-up singing Bar Bar Black Sheep blindfolded, like nothing's going to stop me in a competition. Like say a gun goes off for a starter gun, like that's not going to distract me. Like I've now worked on that, so it's kind of nice to have a bit of loneliness, because then you can really focus in on whatever you're trying to think of. A lot of people have to have training partners, but I've lived my whole life never having training partners, so I kind of love it. I love getting into, I call it my little Kimland, and and that's where I work hard. Sometimes when there's other people around, they distract you, they talk when you want to get something done. I want to make up a shirt that says, I'm not rude, I'm just focused. Like for when I'm at training, because sometimes someone will come up to me and I'll just ignore them because I'm in my Kimland. I think it's what you want, and also what you are used to, but then also having the adaptability to then go into a village where you do have 30 other people out at training and constantly around you, and that's when I turn into a rude person, because I just literally chuck a hat on, put my iPod in and forget about whatever's going on, because being an individual sport is all about you. So you just got to kind of switch on that athlete mode and then make sure people know about that as well, and then switch it off, and like afterwards I'll have a great old chat with everyone. But yeah, once I'm on the track, everyone knows to leave me alone, which is kind of nice. But yeah, I think it's just because I've grown up training by myself and having one-on-one time that I thrive off that.
Race diving, Shannon. In terms of Kim being empowered as an athlete to go off and do her own thing, and it's a situation like the Games, and you've got then 11 other athletes to look after that may or may not be any of your own at all. Have you found any specific things that help you when some of them freak out because they haven't been empowered, they haven't learned how to control their world?
Yeah, the critical thing in terms of when you're going away to a major like that and you know you're going to have athletes that you've never worked with before, is to make contact with their coaches. You have to be able to communicate with their coaches, so you might get on the phone, you talk to them, you're obviously aware of the athlete and the athlete's ability, you know who their coach is. And then once you start to set that relationship up, then you can understand what you need to know what their training program looks like. You need to be able to express to them that they need to be adaptable because things aren't always going to flow. Some of these athletes, it was their first time at a major, and so their expectation is this is my training plan and this is what I need to do, but you're not always able to do those things. And so by having that communication with the coach, getting the cues, getting the feedback from them is important because then you can talk the same language to their athletes. Unfortunately, and I had to meet with the athletes as well, and I said, guys, you know what, the reality is I'm not going to be able to be with you all at any one time because it's not viable. So I needed to get an idea of where they were going to be at whatever session, and I said, look, I will be at your main training session when you need me there, but I'm not going to be at your gym session, I'm not going to be at whatever session. And once the competition started, my priority and my responsibility was the competition. So, for example, I had 2 high jump boys in the final when Kim was preparing for her final. So I had to make arrangements. Now, Kim's easy. I know that she's sorted and organised, but there were also 2 other athletes, Kelsey Roberts, who finished with a bronze medal, and obviously Catherine Mitchell, who unfortunately finished 4th. So I had to make sure I spoke to those athletes about this is what's going to happen with the preparation. You need to make sure you've got your kit ready. You need to be meeting outside of our administration area. Brian's going to go through your kit, check you, get you on the bus down to the warm-up track, and then from there you'll come across. When you come into the main stadium, I'll be then at the back of the high jump, javelin runway, helping you with your run-ups and get things organised. So they needed to feel. And I think you have to learn. You've got to grow. You can't come into any championships not empowered, not being independent enough to be able to make decisions. Because if you're in that situation, then your coach hasn't done a good job at all.
Kim, how do you find it being part of a group where there could be potential freakouts from other athletes?
Yeah, well, it happens all the time. But like I said, I kind of turn almost selfish when it comes to a major. So, like in my room, I was actually next door to Catherine Mitchell, who was, yes, my teammate and a good friend of mine, but also my competitor. And I knew she was going through a little bit of hamstring trouble, and like as awful as that is, I saw that as like something like I kind of liked it because she was freaking out because of this hamstring, not knowing what was going on, and I saw that's my edge over her. But then unfortunately, my comp was on the Wednesday. The Saturday before my comp, I actually hurt myself. I hurt my toe joint where I then couldn't walk very well. It's a pre-existing injury, and I made sure 100% that no one knew that I was injured. To the point where I actually didn't tell anyone until Monday because I had Sunday off anyway, and I thought, look, my foot's really sore. I'm not going to let anyone know. I'm not going to stress anyone out because even if you tell someone, that slight bit of stress just leaks onto you as well, and I didn't want any of that negativity in my prep because I was feeling amazing. So it wasn't until the Monday where my foot was still really bad where I went, oh crap, like I think I need a backup plan. I can't walk on this, let alone pivot and throw. So I then went to Grant, Brian and the doctor, and we had a bit of a plan B sort of action, but not one of the athletes or my competitors or teammates actually knew that I was injured because I didn't want that edge over me. So that's where like you need to sort of like, I could have freaked out, but I love seeing other people freak out because that's a negative thing. Internally, yeah, maybe, but they didn't know that, so they didn't have that edge. In terms of teammates in for a discus or a high jumper or something that was involved with Grant, who may have had a freak out, luckily Grant and I, whenever we have sessions, it's one-on-one sessions, even with a big group. So like Grant said, he doesn't go to everyone's gym sessions or track sessions. It's always their throwing technical sessions that he goes to, and he's very good at having one-on-one time with that one person. So I didn't really get to see a lot of other athletes have their little freakouts because I'd do my thing, pack up and get out of there. And if something negative was happening, I'd be like, oh, my phone's ringing, and I'd leave. I just don't want to have anything negative around me when I'm in comp mode. So that's how I kind of deal with it.
What would be the go for it actually, but what would be if you're saying one word, if you could, what can I take with me to my athletes? And inherently we're all here for WA sport in Australia. What would be the single most important focus? And I know it's an almost impossible question, but the one key thing, if you take through your development, you're 29 and you're in the prime in your game of always, you know, when you were 17, 18, in the difficult years when we lose the most athletes, what would be the one key word? So if you could focus on that, what would that be?
Probably accountability, I'd say. Like I said, if I don't believe in something 100%, I won't do it properly. So Grant and I will go through our program together, and if there's something that he doesn't like that I like, we'll talk through it and we'll get there until the moment where we both are 100% happy with what we're thinking of. Because if, say someone, wrote me a program, like say in the gym, I've had many of conversations with my gym instructor when we first got together where I hated what he was doing with me, and I almost went to the gym and almost on purpose made it not work just to prove a point. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I'm doing all this work for nothing. So you have to believe in what you're doing. And I think it's not someone just telling you what to do, it's the athlete then responding and saying, yeah, I agree in that, and then almost making it like a challenge. And like we set out what our throws are going to be like a month from now, and we have our numbers already written out, and I look at that and I focus in on that, and things change, and that's the life of sport, but we have that plan in place and we can talk about it now for the next month, and that's where I love having control over everything that I do, even sports psych sort of stuff now. I just need to believe in everything that I'm doing, and I think that's what every athlete should do. A lot of people just look at something and do it without even thinking, and I think that's silly. They 100% need to almost be in charge of what they're doing and have the coaches almost like the one who's ticking it off like a teacher. Like, yes, good, that's your homework, you've written out your program. Like, you almost need to have it in your head that that's what you're doing, and the coach almost just tells you you're right or wrong.
Planning.
Just in terms of the planning then, how far out, so for the Commonwealth Games, so say 2 years ago, were you planning to throw a set number there, or is it a month by month where you're building up setting small goals?
I understand what you're saying. If Commonwealth Games is the pinnacle event, so straight after Moscow, Moscow was that, so then straight after Moscow, you sit down and do your annual plan, you work back from Glasgow in terms of where you want to be. My planning is done, I work on a month-to-month cycle, or call them blocks, 3 on and 1 off. I've always done that, and I find that works pretty well for Kim. And so what I start to do is I actually will look at where the domestic competitions are, where do we want to be in those domestic competitions. Kim's goal was to throw the Australian record this year. However, having said that, our plan was not to necessarily taper for any of the domestic competitions because it's where we want to get our work done. Kim, the other thing that's really important with that is, if you're going to have success, then you have to be injury-free. If you're injured, then that's a setback that you can't have. Kim had 10 blocks of training going from Moscow into Glasgow, very, very, somewhat injury-free. There's obviously a few little hiccups here and there, but generally we got through, and one of my goals was to get through 95% of the total workload. That was planned. Not modified, but that was planned, and we did that. And I think that sort of sets itself up as well. So planning is a key thing. So like I said, month by month, you review every month where you're going, so plan it, do it, review it, and that's happening every month. It happens every session. It happens every week. So if you're not doing that constantly, you don't know where your athlete's going to be. Yeah, and things do change. We've had to make some changes here and changes there to the throwing. So I actually have a system that I use to manage the loads that we have, because one of the biggest reasons why people get injured, it's because of the load. There's not too many other reasons. So whether you're a swimmer, or whether you're a baseball pitcher, or whatever it is you're doing, if you don't manage the load, properly, load is what's going to cause injury, whether it's, you know, muscular tendon, skeletal, or whatever. So planning is the key. They do it and review it for me.
A lot of athletes.
Oh, sorry.
Someone else go. Mel?
Mel?
Mel from Athletics. You probably outshine an example of what's working well at the moment in WA. I'm new to athletics and new to the role as a development manager in the sport. How would you recommend, or what is it that we need to do better as a state association to ensure success, repeated success, and that you guys, you know, continue to do what you do, but there's more of you? I guess that's the challenge. That helps other states.
That's something which has been, it's difficult because, I mean, I have a PE background. I've been teaching for 20 odd years. I'm very lucky to be working as a full-time employed coach of waste, which is where we're looking at being an elite. But coming up as a teacher and going through the ranks, so to speak, you know, the big thing is talent identification. It's not just talent identification. The biggest thing, if we want to get better at our sport, we have to make sure that our coaches are well managed, that we have better coach education, that we actually have things for the coaches, because it's the coaches that are going to have an impact on the athletes. If you have poor coaches, you're going to have, you know, you might get one or two, you know, diamonds sort of stand up, irrespective of what the coach is doing. And through growth and development, kids are going to naturally grow and develop. So you have to have good coaches, and you have to have enough coaches to be able to network and to be able to feed into things like this that's going to keep them going. Because the kids are out there, it's just a matter of having somewhere to place them, and then have someone that's going to look after them and grow and develop with them, as opposed to, you know, so that'd be my key thing. Look after the coaches, find the coaches, develop the coaches, look after their education, and then slowly look at bringing them back in. Athletics is an individual sport, and sometimes there's a lot of things that go on and go, oh look, I've got this athlete, so Kim could be somebody else, and go, well, she's going to be my way of getting to the top as an elite athlete. No, that coach, it doesn't work that way. So coaches need to be developed, and they need to understand that. I know there are a lot of other situations where coaches, where kids move through squads into squads into squads, and move from coach to coach to coach to coach, which is another good thing. In our sport, unfortunately, the coach thinks that if I can do that one really well, then I'm going to be a successful coach.
It's in every sport.
But sometimes what needs to happen is either that coach needs to be educated in how to actually further that person along, or that athlete needs to be able to be moved along. The other thing that's really important is that, and athletes don't do this particularly well, is that the athlete's development path from this age to that age, they will go through a number of different coaches, and I think that the role of those coaches needs to be identified, and you need to be able to say, good job, good job, good job, good job, all the way through. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have that, then you get to the situation where you start, you know, I'm going to take that athlete off you, I'm going to go over here, and people become, yeah, I could have done a better job, or there's all sorts of things that go on in sport, as you all know. Yes?
Within our sports generally, gymnastics, we have particular issues and problems. I think Karen can back me up in trying to get the kids who have talent ID'd in various clubs, to get the clubs to release them into the high-level programs, the waste programs. Do you have similar issues with athletics, where the coach, this is my performer, they're staying here?
That's pretty much what they do.
Same thing.
But, I mean, I think, and that's where, there needs to be an education. It's like, there needs to be a pathway set up, and I mean, sometimes the athlete needs to understand what their pathway is. You know, there are different levels going through, so the athlete needs to understand the pathway, the parents need to understand the pathway, and the coach needs to understand where they fit on that pathway as well. Because you don't want to do injustice to the athlete, because at the end of the day, we're only here because of the athlete. And we may get lots of athletes coming through, but the athlete only really has one chance. So if you do that athlete a disservice, then, you know, that's the way I look at it. Move on or move out.
Yes. Roslyn Evans, Commonwealth WA. Kim, and how is it when you've got an injury currently, don't you?
Yep.
So what happens? You've got your plan going ahead, and you've got a big meet coming up. How does that impact? How does that change what you do as a coach and you as the athlete?
Well, from the coaching perspective, it's there's always something you can do. So the things that we can't do out on the track and the running and stuff, Kim now does in the gym. And I've left her to that, to be able to sort that sort of stuff out with the strength and conditioning. I'll see her at the track, we'll do some balls, we'll do what we can do. And I'm trying to get her to the position where that doesn't hurt. She wanted, just to help, the Diamond League final was a week ago?
It was on Friday.
Okay, so Friday, she wanted to go and do that. And then do the Continental Cup. There's only one thing wrong with that. If you go over and do the Diamond League and that doesn't react very well, then your Continental Cup's out. So you have to make a decision as to what's more important to you. And so obviously the Continental Cup was, so my advice to her was don't do that. Stay, give yourself a little bit more time, get that right. We've also got a management plan in place with our physio and our doctor. So we're actually on top of that all the time. So do what you can do, all right? Don't provoke it, and listen to the management team that's around you to ensure that you can get on the plane and get a result.
I find as well, whenever I'm injured, I work harder than when I'm not injured as well, because like obviously it sounds pretty lame that I'm going, oh, I hurt my toe, but it's a very crucial part. But funnily enough, the easiest part of my throwing physically, of my training is throwing. So I've now, in the lead up, it's been 5 weeks, I've had to pull out all of my track sessions where they're not the hardest ones, like the hard sessions of the gym, like load sessions. I've now loaded myself up in gyms with circuits and things that I'm not comfortable with to try and sort of overcompensate for not being able to do a track session. So funnily enough, right now I'm probably in way better shape than what I would have been if my foot wasn't sore. I just haven't had that throwing of a full run up, but yet I've thrown more balls than I normally do. I've done more medicine balls than I normally do. So I like in my head to think that things are meant to happen and almost see the glass is half full rather than empty. So like I said, I'm probably more in better shape now because of an injury, and I kind of like to think of it that way. A lot of people will go, I'm injured, so I'm not going to do that section, I'm only going to do that section. But no, I double up on the section that I can do smartly though. Like they say I train too hard a lot of the time, which I don't think so, but they do, which I probably do. But I thrive off it. Like, yeah, someone's given me a challenge, and the challenge this time is an injury, and I want to win this challenge, and I've won it in my own head right now. Like, I'm feeling great, and yeah, my foot's probably going to hurt when I throw, but in Continental Cup we have 4 throws and 4 throws only, and like I've thrown with a broken rib before, I've thrown with many things wrong with me, but I know I'm very good with pain, but we've got a management process where we've thought of backup plans about what's going to happen afterwards. Like, we've put plates in my shoe to protect the foot, so there's not going to be more damage done to it. It's just going to probably hurt and flare it up. And then we've also, like, we thought, okay, so if that happens, well, then we're going to have to do this, or we're then going to have to do that. And we've both thought, is that worth this competition? We've said yes. So you just sort of got to work through injuries, and if it is like if this wasn't a Continental Cup and it was just like a random, just a Diamond League that wasn't that important, or Diamond Leagues are important, but we probably wouldn't have done it. But Continental Cup, in terms of an athlete, there's not a lot of money in athletics. Commonwealth Games, it's incredible, your profile goes huge and through the roof and everyone thinks you're a millionaire, but there's zero money in Commonwealth Games. So I still rent with, I'm renting with 4 other people in the house, and like it's a struggle, but the Continental Cup is the biggest prize money of the year. So there's that incentive for me just to live. Then also world rankings as well, which really sets you up for the next year. So we looked at those as, yeah, this is worth it, and let's have a go. I do have time afterwards because I'm going to have a little bit of a break. If my foot does get sore, I'll chuck it in a boot and I'll rehab it again, and we've got a process to go through there as well.
Rob from cricket. Just interested in your training and your events and the feedback given. Do you give feedback after every throw or every non-throw, or and what's the relationship between athlete and coach in that?
Once again, it depends on where the athlete's at. I don't give feedback after every throw, particularly because you want the athlete to be able to work things out for themselves as well. And I think it's really important, because if you just start dominating with feedback all the time, then they're going to expect the feedback. So they need to be able to feel what they're doing. So I question the athlete. I go, how did that feel? Yeah, okay, all right. So then I try to manipulate the training sessions a little bit like that, even with a newbie. So if I've got someone, I've just got this young girl, 14 years of age. She's never thrown a javelin before. I did a little bit of work with her before I went away, just because her brother's in the waist swimming program, and so I was like, oh, apparently you've got a good arm, let's have a look. So I just picked up a ball and said, we'll play a bit of throw and catch, and I said, oh, you can throw, you've got a nice robustness about you. So I put a few things together, and then I went away, and I thought, this girl's got some ability, she can actually learn, she's got a good sense of where her body is. So I went away, and I said, don't do anything until I get back. I've come back, I did 3 sessions with her, and I'm starting to see this girl's shape. But it's because of, it's not just the feedback to give them, it's all about letting them have a go, because you can just go, oh, cringe a lot or whatever. But I think, you know, that she may well be a future javelin thrower, but I don't know at this point. So feedback for me is, you have to be able to understand what it is, the concept of what it is you need to do, and then you have to do it. Then you have to practice it. Then you can provide more feedback, but you also ask the athlete, well, okay, how did that feel? And the other thing with the throwing a javelin is the javelin will give you feedback. And so if you let the athlete know what that means when the javelin does this or does this or does this, then they're in a better position to understand what it is they're trying to do. Do you want feedback?
Yeah, like I said, Grant and I almost have the same brain now in terms of javelin throwing, which is really handy. So I'll in my head go, oh, I tip forward on that, and I'll look up and I'd see him doing this, and I'm like, that's exactly how I felt. So that's really good. There's only a few things, like I said, the shortness and things that I can't feel that it's really good to have feedback. But sometimes, like this happened this year at a Diamond League in Monaco, where I was in my loading phase of training, so I wasn't feeling that great. But like it was one of those comps where I knew I had something in me, but I was just missing it, and I was getting really frustrated. And I could see that Grant was trying to tell me things that I already knew, but he was just trying to give me just sort of feedback as a coach would. But I was just in a funny mode.
She's got her cranky pants on.
I got my cranky pants on. So I sat down, and Grant's like waved me over, and I'm like, no, I don't want to come over. And I could just see him like standing there just looking at me, and I could tell that he's looking at me, and I'm doing the old like just ignore, and then like he yells out, Cam! And so I'm looking over, and he's like this, and I just went, no, again, and I sat down, and like about a minute later, I almost laughed myself and went, I'm an idiot. Like that overwhelmed me, that feeling. But I kind of like Angry Kim, like I tap into that whenever I'm struggling. And Angry Kim sort of comes out when it's probably more into like a loading phase where I'm not feeling that great and things aren't going well, and I sort of tap into this just extra sort of level where, yeah, like sometimes I think of things that piss me off, and if I just need that little bit of extra, that's what I do. And so I was trying to channel this, and Grant was trying to tell me, like, to reassure me that I am doing the right things, probably going to tell me some nice things, but I was channeling Angry Kim, and he copped a bit of it, so...
Don't worry, I just went and then walked back and sat down, but then she came over afterwards. It was just one thing that I needed to, getting back to the whole thing about feedback, it was just one thing I needed her to do in terms of her positions, because I knew what she was trying to do, and it wasn't quite happening. So it was just this one little thing that if she held a position, then it would have made a big difference, and so that's what I wanted to tell her. But she did come over the fence afterwards.
And then he told me that my next throw was really good.
And it was.
So in that process, do you feel bad afterwards?
Oh yeah, hugely, and embarrassed. But I couldn't help it. And like there's moments where you're just pissed off, and I was pissed off with myself, and I couldn't help. Like I'm quite obvious. Grant now knows this about me. Like when I'm pissed off, he can tell flat out. I'm pretty much black and white. Like what you see is what you get. So I was pissed off, and I he could see it. I was not going to change it. And then once I had a few deep breaths, I then thought about it, and then I just went, oh, I feel really sorry. Like Grant's, like he's got 2 kids and he's got a life and all these sorts of things. He's over here with me at a track trying to help me out, and here I am not listening to him. Like I felt, pretty bad, but that's what had to happen. Like I was in that mood, and that's what happened, and that's what will happen to every single athlete. Like you can't not go through life and not have bad moments. I'm pretty good though at reflecting back and going whoopsies. But like, and then Grant also, like he said, yeah, no, that's all right. Like I knew what you were doing. We both understood, and that's great. Like some people would be like, no, we'll bugger off, and you'd be pissed off with each other for weeks and weeks and weeks. But we got over it within a minute. Like I came over and went, I'm so sorry, and he was like, look, I know. And then we had a laugh. And then it was back to, all right, so you need to hold this, and then the next throw was great, and then afterwards we, once again, I just went, sorry.
It just took me back to accountability, because obviously you felt sorry, you came back, you solved the problem, everything, and it was back to the planning, the strategies and everything, so that was quite interesting.
Yeah, and like we're human, like he's going to have a bad day, I'm going to have a bad day, and as long as we realise that, then it's fine. You can accept having a bad day. It's as long as you communicate as well. I know I went through a patch where I wasn't communicating with him, and he was getting so not angry at me, but probably angry at me because I wasn't telling him. And now I know I can just say, Grant, I'm really pissed off, I'm in a bad mood, leave me alone. He'll be like, all right, cool. And then like, you just got to sort of know your athlete.
You got to find those things out too. When you travel, like I said, there was a period of time, more so further back in our relationship, and it was like, okay, this is getting really weird and uncomfortable, and what's going on, and so you work that out, and then you have that conversation. You go, look, you know what, Kim, we're going to be away. It's okay to be able to do your own thing, and we don't have to have breakfast together or lunch or dinner together and spend every moment time together, because that's just not normal. I don't care. You don't do that anyway. We don't do that here. But occasionally it's okay to be doing that. Go, right, we've got training, I'll meet you there, or you go and warm up, I'll meet you down there, and I'll find my own way, or whatever. So you have to be as normal as you can in those environments, and that's where you learn a lot more about each other. And like I said, we've been doing this now for 11 years, and we've been travelling away together since 2007, so you don't know what's going on now, you never will.
I think that's the best thing about Grant though. It's very rare that you can tell a person that they're annoying you. Like, because, and vice versa. He can be doing absolutely nothing wrong, you're just in that sort of mood. And I think it's really important that we have this ability to just flat out say what we're feeling, and he accepts it, and then I accept it, and it's a great relationship to have, because you're going to have those ups and downs, and if you kept it quiet and didn't sort of communicate that, that's where problems can arise, and that's where I think we fit perfectly now, because I can just flat out just say, I need a day away from you. And he can say the same thing, and it's great. Like, we accept that. And like, Grant's one of my best friends. So it's like, he's my coach, he's my friend, and he's a father of 2 with like he's just a normal guy as well as an amazing coach. So it's kind of cool to be able to just be so comfortable around someone and have your bad days as well as your good days, because you're human. And a lot of people, athletes, just don't realise that they can be human sometimes, and the people that they're working with are human as well. Like, everyone has the same problems as everybody else. It's just that we're doing it overseas and doing it in sort of a bit of a media sort of style, lifestyle. But we've just adapted and accepted, and that's why it's such a success.
Ladies and gentlemen, is there one more question? Yes, in the back. Yeah, just what age do you think you became a real active participant in your own development, or have you always been intrinsically motivated?
Yeah, I do love to work hard, and I love a challenge and things like that. And I've always wanted to have control over what I was doing, but never really knew that I had the right to have control over everything that I was doing, because obviously it's an individual sport, but I've got Team Mickle around me, so I've got the Grants and the Bryans and like the sports like BioMex and all that sort of stuff. So I think it has only really come to my attention that I actually can have control over everything maybe the last 4 years, probably since maybe Delhi Com Games, and from Delhi Com Games I got the silver there. Then the following year I was 6th at the World Championships where I broke my rib, and then it was London, and then it was my World Champs where I got the silver, and now it's gold. So ever since I've taken responsibility and control, it's except for London. But that's when, like I said, like when something goes wrong, you just chuck it into the next year, and you figure out why did that happen. And then obviously we found Brian found us and helped us out, and like we've just tapped into a whole new ball game now where like I feel like we've got the best secret in the world of this guy here in terms of trying to work this as well as this. So yeah, probably about 4 years ago, I'd say.
In comparison to when you were a teenager?
Yeah, no, I just, like I do everything that was written or that I had to do, even if I didn't really believe in it, or understand it, yeah. And I think that I think it comes with a bit of maturity as well. I think after like the last 4 years, like I am 29, but yeah, just being able to understand the way of life and the way that things happen, and that things are like a roller coaster, and to be able to accept and like the injury question, like not letting injuries get you down, but making it a positive thing, and just things like that. So I just think athletes need to grow, and by like I was 26 or 25 when I think I actually switched the switch of like, oh hang on, I do have control.
Can I answer a little bit? Can I say something a little bit on her behalf? I know this is probably, she's certainly very intrinsically motivated, and ever since I've known her, she has been. So I started working with Kim when she was like 17. She won the World Youth Championships when she was 15 in 2001. She's also played high-level soccer and a lot of other things. So I think it's funny, it's like you get the realisation is more about, do I know my event? Because you have to know your event, and I think that's what it comes down to is I can throw this a long way, but I'm still not sure of really where I am with it. And I think it's an interesting point that she brought up, is that I didn't know I could have control at this level because everybody's doing little bits for it, but ultimately we're all trying to make sure that she can get the best performance. So if she doesn't take some control and be empowered by it, she's the only one that's out there throwing, then that's really what it comes down to.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to call that a day there. The questions. Please join me in thanking Ryan and Kim. We're going to wrap that up now because I know people got other places to go to. I was going to ask you some questions to do some work, just very quickly. The only thing I was interested in was, I think we, the village, whatever, DSR, waste, whoever it happens to be, I don't know, but I think we need to look at what can we do. Gold Coast is going to be a big thing, not for all schools in this room, I appreciate that, but it's going to be a big thing. What can we do to make sure those earlier statistics aren't true again? Because I know we've all got different views and we'll come to different practice, but I think that's really rubbish. I think those numbers I put up to you with in terms of the WA representation is an embarrassment, and I'm not even on that way. So there's a thought on that. Clearly, Kim and Grant, thank you very much for doing that. A couple of things on Kim, just to save her blush, she would never say so. But what Kim has, she has a fantastic work ethic, which is really good. So if you have athletes that have that work ethic, that is fantastic. You just have to channel them. You have to be careful that they don't overdo it and bugger themselves up. The other thing she got pretty much when she came out of the womb was she's got something called high motor educability. Educability in terms of how she picks up skills and things. I've known thousands of athletes over the years. She'd be in the top 4 athletes I've ever known who, if you say to her for a laugh, now can you run in and throw like somebody else, or can you pretend you're a footy player and she can do a banana kick 50 metres into the goal from sideways and so on, that she can do those things. So that's handy. So if we pick up the athlete who's got the good work ethic and got the motor educability, now we're at danger. Kim is far too short to be any good at javelin throwing. It's an absolute rule, absolute rule. She's too short, she can't be good at javelin. But obviously she's ranked number 2 in the world. The bumblebee, the traditional English bumblebee, I don't know if you want to say anything here, it's a great big fat thing, it's got tiny little wings. Bumblebees can't fly, but thankfully they can't speak English, so they don't know that. So so they just carry on flying anyway. And that's just true, isn't it? That's the fact. Biomechanically, physically, bumblebees can't get off the ground. It's impossible, but they do every day. Kim's too short to be a javelin shot, but you can do it, because you can do it, and I would suggest you do it if you've got the work ethic, you've got the motoric ability. Now we're talking you're a dangerous person. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the sermon for today. I hope you enjoyed that, and I think there's tea and coffee over there.